Hello, hello, fellow diasporas of the world. We have Nuria and myself, Vanessa Leung, here today. Through living between worlds, we're here to have deep, meaningful conversation on a specific topic, and we come together every 2 weeks. This space is for first and second generation immigrants and diasporas of the world to come together to honor themselves, to provide themselves a space to be heard, to be seen, and to be loved. And today's topic, we have attachment to external validation, which is another beautiful topic. And we always, I have to say, like with these topics, I never know what to expect out of what these topics will offer. But I have to say, like every other week when we do talk about this, it's like it so aligns with something that might happen in my life. And it's so useful in that sense. Like it just kind of helps open your mind up to kind of seeing possibilities when we engage in these conversations. Like, I'm hearing, we're all hearing each other's stories, and then we get inspired. We kind of shift our own perspective, and we're allowing ourselves to expand our perspective as well. And it's been so neat to kind of walk away from these conversations and then apply it to my own life. And I can only imagine, if you are joining us live or on the replay, let us know, kind of what you gain from these conversations. And we invite you to join us in the heart-to-heart conversations. So we host meetups every other bi-weekly Saturdays. So our next meetup will be on June 18th on this very topic on attachment to external validation. So we invite you to come join us. Like this is just kind of like an opener that we do as a live, just to kind of get the juices flowing. And then when we do the meetups, it's in a private meetup room, private Zoom room that we host, and we're just there to just share and just experience each other through our lived experiences. So Nuria, external validation, there's that, and then there's attachment to external validation. So I was kind of thinking about this just from the base, like from the aspect of like when I even kind of understood the whole concept of external validation. And I think for myself, it was probably even in my earlier years, like I could sense that there was this like rebellious attitude of mine. Like, there's this sense of like, I don't care what other people think, right? And so it's like, well, where does that really come from? What is that really, right? So for myself, I recognize that this sense of like, oh, I don't really care what other people think is like this idea that I'm not attached to the validation of others outside of me. And when we talk about external validation, it's feeling validated, feeling approved, feeling that enoughness, feeling the wholeness, feeling the acceptance for yourself. And then the external piece is then you're receiving it from an external resource. And usually it's by another human being. And then attachment is when we're just kind of holding on to, we feel like we might be stuck or trapped in it, where it's almost like you start to do things in order to kind of try and receive external validation. At least that was my observation, was like this idea of like, oh, I'm kind of it's nice that I do something nice, but like, let's wait to hear what other people think. Right. So anyways, that was kind of my first kind of like, okay, I don't want to care about what other people think. So why is that? For you, Nuria, kind of what was your first kind of sense of external validation, and then noticing when you're attached to it?
Lots of things came up when you drop the topic, that I have to step back and review what was happening with me when I read the topic. It was really confronting, because I would say that for many, many, many years, I was so attached to whatever represented a reinforcement on my codependency, that I didn't want to miss any factor that might be a threat to that codependency, to make that codependency disappear. So, and of course, it took so many years of therapy, so many losses, and so many self-confrontations to step out of that codependency. So when I look at the concept of external validation with perspective, I think it's important for me to make the distinction between being needy and wanting or desire the external acknowledgement, where building up relationships is about co-creation and reciprocity. So it's not from the standing point of whatever I am bringing on the table, you have to do the same. It's not that. It's more, let's think in this communion where I get acknowledged. So one day I read a poem. I can't remember the author. I think it was Mario Benedetti, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably Maya Angelou, because she's got a lot on this topic.
So I don't know if it was him or Mario Benedetti, one or the other, but he says, the only way that I have to prove my existence is through the other's eyes. Yes, and the surface, right? Like if you are not looking at me at the moment, how do I know that I exist? But I think the entire concept is way more deep. It's really, if you don't acknowledge my existence, who am I? So for me, now it's important to say, yes, I want the validation. And that doesn't mean that I cannot acknowledge all my improvements by myself. It just means that in this communion, we all exist. And taking all of that outside of that codependency cycle, that is really dangerous at the end of the day. And I remember probably 8 months ago or so, I don't remember what I was saying to my husband, but it was something like, did you like dinner? Did you like dinner? Did you like dinner? But so he said, why do you need that validation? And I was like, oh. But now that you brought up that topic, I'm like, no, what's wrong with asking for validation? It's okay. It's okay. I want to know that the effort that I put on it was appreciated, that you felt, and more than it was appreciated, I want to know if I contributed to give you a moment of pleasure. With a taste, like a nice meal, we hang out, and I don't know, like a complete experience. So I think the validation might be also how much I'm contributing to your life to get a great experience. And that there's nothing wrong on it. but it comes more from the desire than from the lacking.
Yeah.
So there is something missing on me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important to distinct, right? Like, is it coming from lack? Or is it coming from this place of like, yeah, I'm already full. I'm already feeling good about myself, but it's more just like, hey, yeah, it's kind of like a bonus. I'd love to kind of have that acknowledgement. And yeah, it's so interesting that because there's so many different ways we can look at this, right? Like, and I think that's the thing. It's like a lot of the sometimes, yeah, we view external validation as being like a big no, like, no, I've got to like validate myself. I've got to, there's that piece. Yes, there's so much truth in learning how to validate yourself. But again, is it coming from that place of lack and looking elsewhere to fill your cup, basically looking for someone else to make you feel whole, versus like, okay, I'm actually, yeah, I know what I created was amazing, but let's just have some fun here. let's receive a little bit more, right? And I think that it's important to distinguish that there is that nuance, that there is that kind of, whether it's a fine line for you or not, or if it's a hard line of like, can you actually distinguish when I think there's a bit of awareness that's required on the self to be able to kind of notice that. Right. And I think for myself, like, like yesterday, I had one of my best friends come over and we just like talked all night. Hello, Steph. If you're watching this, I'm saying hello to you. And it was just so easy. It was just so natural. Like the conversation just kept going, bounce, 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 bounce. And, for something like that to happen so easily and so naturally, like I know that there's a difference between that conversation and then with someone like, I'm going to say like maybe with my dad, because he's always someone that I had trained, like I was conditioned to like look for external validation for a long time. So it's like, I can sense how unnatural it is in my being when I am in that place of lack. So I'm just offering here that this is kind of how I notice myself, how I notice when I am in place of lack, or whether I am in that place of like, I'm just loving myself. I'm I'm totally present and being with my good friend here. And it's just easy. And I'm not thinking about what I'm offering. I'm not thinking about, wanting to say certain things in order to receive that validation. So it's kind of like, why is it that some relationships, there is that neediness where it's like, okay, I want this person to like, give me a good pat on the back, right? Like it's almost like I deserve it. And I'm going to sit around here and wait for this person to give me a pat on the back or like a good thumbs up.
Yeah. But also, you know what? I think as long as we live surrounded by a group of people, validation is a really primitive instinct.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
See,
love what
if you're in your cave, well, you're in your cave and
yeah.
Right. And still you need your self-validation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love what you said, why like it's, the external validation where it's just acknowledging your existence. I think if for me, if you simplify it to just that point, this person is just validating my existence here. That's all. Like, and nothing more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That keeps it really simple and clear, right?
Yeah. And also understanding that our existence has an impact in others, no matter what. So that validation might show up in different presentations, you know, like if your impact in that person is not through their lenses, a good impact, they're gonna validate you based on that point of view.
Yeah.
If it's a great impact, same.
Yeah.
But there is not good or bad validation, it's just validation.
Yeah, I mean, another example is just even before we started this conversation, right? Like, you know, I already had, there was a situation where I was like, okay, I've already made peace with something, and I already validated that it's okay. Like, this thing happened because this other person was projecting their issue on me, and I was at peace with it. And then you were just like, hey, just an FYI, I wanted to acknowledge you and let you know that, yeah, it was totally not about you, right? And that was, to me, such a bonus. It was just kind of like, yeah, I didn't really need it. And it was just kind of like nice to have, right? It's like, and in that sense, like, I felt seen by you. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I saw myself, but like, to have someone else see me, it's like, yeah, I do. It helps my existence. It helps me as a human being know that, okay, there's a like, I guess in some way, a purpose that I'm here, right? Like, there's this kind of drive to like keep existing, right? Because if you're in your room all by yourself, right? Like, and just stay in your room all by yourself, then yeah, then how do you know you even exist? Anyways.
Yeah, really. Because it doesn't matter if you make like noises, like if nobody is listening, there is no echo, right? So you know, I was just thinking about something that I've been really dealing with. My little one, she's phenomenal, and she's learning how to interact with the world without compromising who she is. And she's open to receive whatever insight is available. And what is interesting is she's also learning how to being part of the world and allowing to her frustrations to show up.
Yes.
When she receives the insights. But what I am dealing with is that when I provide her with my insight, with all my love and with all my you know, I'm really careful with the way I word things for them. And still, the way she looks at me, it's you know, it's really challenging for me to keep the eye contact. And it's a 12-year-old. But what she communicates is too much. It's too much. It's too much existence there.
Yeah.
For her and for me. And of course, when I tell her, like, please verbalize what is happening, we go to a further conversation always. But that I think validation requires to stay, regardless of the impact of your existence. So for me, when I provide her with the insight, I know that the impact right away it's not a good impact. And it goes in both ways, because as her mom, I want to be cool. So something that I've been reflecting on is that on that space of validation, when we accept things instead of embracing them, whatever is there in between the validation between you and the other person and the validation in the middle is going to persist. And I know it sounds like really complex what I am saying, but I noticed that if I said, or if I make an interpretation about the validation, it's like, okay, this is the validation, it's enough, so I'm going to accept it as it is. And my energy totally changes when I embrace that instead of accepting it as it is. Because when I embrace it, I enjoy it. It brings me up. It's beautiful. But when I am only accepting it, I can easily go to conclusions of the validation I received, which can be my daughter looking at me really, in a really strong way, or can be my husband's comments of, why do you need that level of validation? Instead of just allowing whatever is there to happen. But Nuria, stay to really embrace it and receiving the validation. Otherwise, what is going to persist is my need to be codependent.
Yeah.
So, of course, it's a lot of things to process because this thing happens in seconds, right?
Yeah. I think it's like with any emotion, it reminds me of kind of like even feeling joy, like you could feel, exhilarated when something great happens. And it's like, okay, yeah, that was fun. That was great. And then like your mind just kind of moves on to the next thing, right? So it's kind of like what I'm gathering, what you're sharing is like, when you receive that validation, it's like really extending it and really kind of stay, like you said, staying with it, really expanding into that feeling of receiving it. And the embrace is that love of like, okay, I'm really going to cherish or appreciate. It's kind of like extending that. And then that's where it's almost like, what I'm seeing is like, it's a beautiful co-creation of like the external and internal validation. So it's like, it's an external that you then turn into an internal. It's that transition of like, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to like amp it up internally on my own, like really validate this and receive it in that way. So yeah, I love that, because I kind of get that sometimes, even when I like feel good about something that I accomplished, right? Like if I check something off my list, it's like, okay, I could be like, yeah, I checked it off my list and that's, yeah, I feel great about it. But to really like slow down to say, hey, I did this, right? That moment of like acknowledgement, it's like it extends, it really kind of makes it so much more, juicy. Right. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's the word, more juicy. That's the word, because it happens all the time. All the time. Like really, when when people say like, you you wear this dress, or you buy these shoes or whatever is, and it's for you. Yeah, but you want to be acknowledged. You want that people say, "Oh my God, cool boots." You know, and I know it sounds really superficial, but it's like building intimacy doesn't happen all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you start, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna say it as it is. How many times people have said, and at the end of it, says, "Did you like that?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a natural primitive instinct, but
Yeah.
you don't get to that point. Like, I mean, what is the difference between acknowledging my boobs and saying, "Yeah, it was a great sex"? There is
Mm-hmm.
no difference.
Yeah.
No difference. It's something, first of it's primitive, it's instinctive, um, and to get to a point of really create a relationship, a true relationship, I
Yeah.
think validation is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is where it kind of comes back down to like, yeah, it's primitive. Like when we say primitive, like it's, even if you just think about like your life as a baby, you're relying on your parents or your caretaker to give you shelter, give you food and water and love. And that's where it's like, you learn as a baby when you do certain things, you see your parents smile, right? And it's like, oh, already there's that communication of like getting that cue. It's like a cue of like, hey, we're connecting here.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's that sense of connection. But I do want to talk about like the other side of it where, there is that sense of when you're the neediness piece, right? Like, yes, there's the healthy part of attachment, but then there's there's that piece where you feel trapped and you're kind of in a loop. And I think it's important to kind of to talk about that piece too, because I mean, I know from my own experience, right? Like, I brought up my relationship with my dad multiple times, like there, as the eldest daughter, like I'm Chinese background, second generation immigrant. So it's like, my dad was the one who raised us. Well, he had custody of us. But this is where it's like my mom wasn't really around when we were kids. So this is where like he was the one parent that I wanted that cue from, right? And that's where it's like when I didn't receive that cue, it felt like, yeah, I wasn't good enough, or I had to do more. I had to like be more in order to receive that cue, right? And this is where unconsciously we can carry that through with us to our adulthood, where it then kind of starts to ripple into our careers, right? And it's all about kind of getting the promotion, right? Like getting or even just getting a job, right? Like it's just all these kind of aspects of life where it's like we want these things outside of us, whether it's a career or whether it's like the status of a car, like or your clothes, right? Like these things kind of providing that cue that, oh, okay, I'm doing well, right? So that's where I think it becomes kind of a trap, and then you're unconscious of it, and it almost seems like you then become someone you're not, because you're wanting this external validation consistently, right? And there's like you end up losing yourself because you're not actually connected with yourself and having that self-acknowledgement.
I think in my own experience, that was really dangerous for me, because
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't only reaching for that validation, but I was demanding the validation. Like it was a demand, right? Like I grew up, as I've shared many times, in a family where there was like lots of love, lots of caring, but it was overwhelming because that caring was all the time providing excuses, justifying things that were not working in the family dynamic, um, to cover up secrets, family secrets. Because it was like, let's not talk about this because it's so painful, right? So we provided validation through other behaviors. So I remember that, I mean, my mom was a single parent, and because at that time was pretty unusual to be a single parent, my mom and my family were so worried about what's gonna happen to this poor girl, right? That she's weak because she doesn't have this family structure that is expected. So they put me in that sort of pedestal, but that pedestal had attached the, okay, you are so special, we're gonna validate you all the time to build up your confidence, your self-confidence, but there is a price on it. So the price is that the role you're gonna play in this family, it's crucial because we're gonna give you so much that you have to take all the advantage out of it as much as possible, and then to give back to the family, right? So growing up, it was such a burden on my shoulders because my mom was playing that role in her family. So organically, it was expected for me to take over. And I didn't. And the price, of course, it was really painful because it was like lots of family resentment there and lots of relationships to work out in the way that we were engaging one another, but which was fine, because it was needed in order to help the family to evolve in many ways, to take ownership of their own individuality and the impact of their behavior in the collective. But the personal impact was really awful for me because in a really young age, I was looking for that validation. I was demanding it. Like it had to happen. So taking responsibility of that, and of course, it developed up the codependency, as I mentioned at the beginning. Right. And I would say, like, taking my responsibility of what happened in my previous marriage, that I was married for about 13, 14 years or 16, something like that. And my 50% of contribution was my codependency. It was there, right? And it's really damaging for a relationship when you are with a person who is codependent. It's pretty damaging. There is no freedom.
Right.
There is no freedom for nobody. It's all the time like chasing victimism. Nothing is enough. There is no validation that is enough. Because you're not enough.
Right. Yeah. There's that expectation as well. Like, like you said, the demanding aspect of it. Right. So I think, what you brought up was just this aspect of, I think that the difference between healthy validation and unhealthy validation is really knowing the intent behind it, right? Like, is it, and I think we talk about authenticity all the time, and it's like, are you actually like, so I'm just saying, like, if I'm someone who is like, yeah, in that space of where I'm always looking for external validation, how do I actually step away from detaching to it and not being attached to it, in that sense of like demanding it or looking for it or like kind of waiting around to like feel enough. It's almost kind of like allowing yourself to step back to look at, oh, whether it's like looking at your past, was I actually taught, was I actually validated all the time from the space of where it was actually kind of like manipulation, where it's like, if I validate you now, then this is what I'm expecting from you, right? So it's almost like kind of asking yourself. Then I know, like, I usually, the work, when I do my internal work, I kind of look at, the way I would approach this is, okay, in what ways do I inauthentically validate other people, right, in order to try and get something, or try and have this person be a certain way to fulfill a certain role, right? Like, in what ways am I, because if I'm looking for external validation, I'm probably doing a lot of that as well. And I think this is where, like, for me, this is where like helping everybody on their problems was kind of like this idea of like, oh, I'm validating these people, but I'm looking for, at the same time, I'm looking for the validation back that I'm helping people. Right. So it's kind of like, well, why am I looking for that validation? It's because I'm actually like unconsciously or maybe consciously like saying nice things to people just because I want something in return. Being completely humble to yourself and asking, are you truly doing something? And I guess this is along the lines of people pleasing, right? Like, are you truly doing something in order to, just because you want to, just because it's you love this person and you want to offer this person? And can you just stop there and not wait for that, even just a thank you? It would be nice to just have a thank you, right? Like, it's just a thank you is all I want. Well, even that little bit of validation, just doing something in order to receive that little bit of validation, is already kind of coming from this place where it's not actually being honest to yourself and honest to this person. So I just wanted to share that, because I was like thinking, yeah, right. Like, if you've been trained, and this is where, I've had that experience before too. It's like my dad would tell me, oh, you're doing so well in school, like, give you all the praise, right? And then here are all the things that you've got to do, like, now that you're successful, and here's all the things that you got to take care of now, right? So yeah, it's like there's that truth, right? Like, whether it's actually there's that authenticity or not.
And also the misunderstanding of gratitude.
Of gratitude, is that what we said?
Gratitude, because when you say, like, or at least say thank you, and it's like, because I've heard people think, or also me probably have said, like, you have to be at peace with being grateful.
Yeah.
And you cannot be grateful for massive things if you're not even grateful for me doing this for you. So what is gratitude is something bigger than saying thank you, right? Like, it's and again, it's really personal, and and also I think it requires lots of courage and be willing to be humble, as you said, to also acknowledge, hey, would you mind validating me a little bit
Yeah.
here? I would love to hear that, because we don't ask for the acknowledgement.
Yeah. Yeah.
We desire it so much, but we don't ask for it.
Yeah. No, I think that's so awesome, because it's like you're just going straight for it. You're just asking. You're not like tiptoeing around the topic. It's like, oh, let me do all these things in order to receive that validation. It's like, no, I just want validation. Can you just give it to me, please? Right? Like, it's just so much. It's like a shortcut, right? Like, why do we have to do all these things, right? Like, if you want it, ask for it. Yeah.
Because also, you know what? I think it's a great gift that it's also a great gift for the other person involved.
Yeah.
Because you matter to me that much that I really want you to see me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that's exactly the reciprocity piece that I was talking about.
Yeah, totally.
Like it's not that I am expecting you to do the same thing I'm doing. I'm just dancing with you.
Right.
And yes, validate me, please.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, like you said, it is a gift for the other person. Because if you think about, like, if you are truly validating someone out of your heart, it's not actually for the other person. It's you want to validate this person because you want to feel good. And at the same time, like, we're taught that when we offer something loving, that naturally we're going to feel loving, and the other person's going to feel loving as well, right? At least you're hoping that this person will feel well as well, right?
Yeah. 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 And so another thing that I guess, and I mentioned it before, but I think it's really important, is to not make any interpretation around the way validation happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to give you an example, the other day, an incredible friend of mine sent me a text message. And usually the way we talk is like, hey, my love, hey, friend, how are you? Particularly with her, it's like, hey, friend, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. And twice in a row, she texted, hey, Nuria, how is it going? I took it so personal. I was like, she's mad. And right away I was like, what did I do? What did I do? But I haven't seen her in 4 months, right? Or 3. What did I do? What did I do? And then I was having a conversation with my eldest, and she said, Mom, you old people are weird. And I was like, okay. Define old people. And she's like, you don't understand that text messages say a lot. I was like, well, so yeah, if you text back to me and just with okay, I'm like, oh. But if you said, and it gets even worse when you write okay, period. It's like and then I thought, wow, like in her generation is clear. Like every single symbol has a different connotation and validates the person in a different way. And then I realized, yes, in her generation, but also I'm making an interpretation of my friend calling me by my name.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then like 2 days later, my friend texted me again, hey friend, what do you think about? So I was just making an interpretation about whatever was happening in a text message.
Yeah.
So I was casting in doubt the friendship.
Right.
So
yeah.
It's such a dangerous slope, I would say.
Yeah.
When you're not clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. it kind of makes me think about like how much we rely on things being the same and that being a validation, right? Like, that routine of your friend calling you, hey friend, right? Like, and when it's when it's unfamiliar, when it's like, a little tweak, right? It's not normal. That's where fear kicks in and says like, oh, something is wrong because it's not the same as what it's always been. Like how we kind of always base everything from the past to like receive that validation. And that's so interesting how like unconscious it could be, even just showing up in a certain way is already a validation to someone.
And you know what? I remember when I started dating with my husband at the beginning, he called me by my full names. And I found that really attractive. And one day I asked him, why do you call me by my full name? Right? And he said, because to me it's like showing respect. I love it. So I took it like great, right? But now when he calls me by my name, I get so mad. I'm like, why are you calling me by my name? Why do you want me to call you? He says. And I'm like, I don't know, love of my life. I don't know. And now he, like bothers me with that constantly. Hey, Nuria.
Just get a reaction out of you. Yeah.
Yeah. But those tiny things, right?
Yeah. I mean, it comes back down to like how we, how you were saying, like, there's that validation of your existence, right? Like, it's all these little things that kind of validate your existence. And when you're not conscious of it, it's just everyday things, right? Yeah. And it kind of shakes you a bit, but it's like just letting everyone know that it doesn't mean that you're not validated, that you don't exist. When things change, it doesn't mean that something has gone wrong, right?
And that it's okay to ask for validation.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. No, and I love that. It's like that's an aspect that I love about my partner, because he's always like, and I bug him about it because I'm like, why do you even ask me? Because so he'll typically ask me for my opinion on something, and it's for validation. It's like, I just want to be able to like talk it through and then be able to see that I'm like on the right line, like on the right track or whatever, right? So it's kind of like for him, it's constantly kind of like, okay, for me, I'm kind of like, well, why do you ask my opinion if you're not going to listen to me, right? But for him, it's really just like, no, I'm just sharing with you because I want you to validate me. I want you to like tell me that I'm not crazy here, right? And it's important to have that. But maybe, I don't know what other males are like. Maybe males are more kind of to the point in that way. It's like, I'm here to want validation, but for women, it's like, no, I've got to like, and that's our conditioning too. I've got to do all these things in order to receive recognition, right? Like the caretaker, we've got to like, go above and beyond in order to receive like the good friend label or the good mom label, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I think one thing is to receive the validation of what you contribute. And another totally different thing is to get a validation about the role you are playing. Because that role might change.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's what is where we have to be more aware.
Yeah. It's like that check-in, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have that check-in. And that's where it's like these this is where it's not diminishing your value or anything. It's more just, hey, it's an opportunity to check in. Is this actually who you want to be anymore? Or is there a little adjustment that you want to make? Do you want to redefine your role in this situation now? Right. And that's where, like, yeah, from my relationship with my partner, that was where it was like, I made it mean previously that he didn't like validate me, right? He didn't care about what I was saying, like, but he was still asking me, right? Like I made it mean something bad until I was like, oh, okay, that was the check for me of like, oh, I don't have to see it that way. It's actually, oh, his way of like, he just wants to, he just wants to run something by me and be heard and be seen, right? And that's where it's like, okay, that's my role now, is like, if you're going to ask me for my opinion, I'm not going to expect the other thing, right? Like for you to actually listen to me, but it's more I'm going to expect to be the listener and to be the acknowledger in that sense. Yeah. So that's key. Like, I love that idea of like just using it as a way to check in with yourself, check in with like, are you being honest with who you are? Right.
Yeah. Because it's been labeled in such a negative way, like, oh, you just want validation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I'm glad this is where we can kind of always share different perspectives and open ourselves up to seeing different ways, right? Yeah. I love that. So I think this is where, like, for those of you who want to continue this conversation, like, bring your stories to our meetup on June 18th. It's in the description. Bring it and just share, because it helps to talk it through. It helps to kind of like hear and see, okay, in what ways can I apply this to my own life, and how does it actually change the way I think about that external validation, right? Like, I think for me, even in this conversation, it was just kind of like really kind of expanding and really kind of focusing in on like, oh, what is the difference between what is healthy and unhealthy validation, and just in that distinct, like that just being able to see that difference helps you approach different situations like more open-mindedly, kind of in that way, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nuria, and thank you for those of you who join us. Come, like I said, come bring your stories, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah. And you know what? I was thinking like maybe Blend's coffee can sponsor us. Like I've been holding the entire time. Okay, Blend, do your job.
We're gonna have to blur it out. It's like, wait. All right. Thanks, dear.
Okay, thank you.